Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor-in-chief of National Jeweler. I'm pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler and Jewelers of America's co-branded webinar series. This month's webinar is sponsored by the Gemological Institute of America. Today, Regina Carleglio and I are co-hosting a session on how to buy and sell vintage jewelry. We are joined by Kathy Calhoun, owner of Calhoun Jewelers, Lauren Levy, founder of Lauren DeYoung Jewelry, and Julie Thompson-Lariche, Chief Operating Officer at the Jewelers Circle. Before we get the webinar started, I just want to let everyone know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of their screens. I will be back on at the end of the discussion to share the questions. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday, March 22nd. Now, I'll hand it over to Regina to get the discussion started, and I'll be back on the end to field any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and welcome to Lauren, Michelle, Julie, and Kathy. I really appreciate you taking your time and your expertise today, because this is a hot subject. And as Michelle had said, we have over 200 people who came to this webinar. So obviously there's something going on. So I'll start first with Kathy. What defines vintage?
Vintage to me could be anything from I used the term estate as well, pre-owned, but I like vintage to be used for different periods of jewelry. Your Art Deco, your Edwardian, retro. So vintage can span the globe for me, but must be a pre-owned and set in a period of time.
Okay. And is there a difference, in your opinion, between vintage and estate?
And also, I would throw in, people are always asking us this, what is the difference then? What is the line between vintage, estate, and then antique?
Maybe someone else can chime in on that. To me, yeah.
Sure, I'd love to give my take on this. So first of all, I think this is actually a great example because in our industry, vintage can sometimes be an ambiguous term. So, Webster's dictionary, vintage, the definition, dating from the past. I think when you go past that, it can sometimes be used interchangeably with other words like estate, but I define it as something that is more than 20 years old. And then between that and something that is 100 years old. If it's older than 100 years old, I would consider it to be an antique piece.
Antique.
But having said that, everybody has their own definition, and very often vintage is just used interchangeably with pre-owned. So it's important, that you ask questions about, when you're working with somebody to kind of make sure you're operating on the same terms.
And Julie, what is your feeling on that? Like the vintage and estate, how do you look at it from the Jewelers Circle?
I think, again, back to what Lauren was saying, for me, it's very much about the way we look at it. It's anything that's pre-1980s. That's how we would kind of set the bar between what's more contemporary and vintage.
Okay. And would you all agree, and sometimes I don't like always using this phrase, but so estate, vintage, it's really kind of interchangeable. Yes or no?
A little bit. I would say estate does have the implication that there is some additional generational component to it. Again, it's what however the person who is using it interprets it.
Right.
But that is my opinion on it.
And Lauren, I definitely agree with you. I mean, anything 100 years or older, we are allowed to call it antique.
Okay. All right. So
I have a quick question. Yeah. Lauren, given your earlier definition of vintage, does this mean now that stuff from the early 2000s is now vintage?
So this is one of the fun things. So first of all, I'll say I'm 6th generation jeweler. So the goalpost is always moving as time goes on. And I mean, this is one of the things that we're seeing trend wise, things that, were popular in the 2000s are now coming back as a vintage trend. I can see you making a face there, but
this seems not that long ago.
I mean,
know.
I agree, but it's fun. It's a fun part of this business that the goalpost is always moving. And, you know, we see that these trends and patterns and areas come back into vogue, which is fun.
Right. Or the gold post, no pun intended. Okay. But hey, I'm going with it. So let's flip back. Let's go with you, Julie, on this one. What are some names, right? If I'm someone who's like, oh, I want to kind of check out vintage jewelry, right? Or estate jewelry, and I wanted to Google some things, what are some of the biggies? What are some of the big names to look out for?
Currently, you mean what's trending?
In terms of brands, yeah, some of the vintage
in terms
brands.
of brands, where the big names are obviously trending. Well, we see it from the search that we have on our website. Tiffany is one of the big ones that's currently very popular. Bulgari, Van Cleef, those are of course, and then of course are the names. You know, Harry Winston, all of the Cartier, all the famous ones. But yes, those are the top names for which we see the higher volume of queries.
Okay. And Kathy, on your end?
And then this is probably because we are catering for two types of audiences. One, which is more, you know, looking for the bigger names, but we are also catering for collectors who are looking for more pointed names, such as Boivin, for example, for whom we see also a certain level of queries. So
Kathy,
it's because also we have these two profiles of audience.
And Kathy C, what do you see?
Yes, I think there's a very interesting website and a company that deals in estate jewelry called Eden. And when you go on their website, they really dive deep into the pieces that they're selling, and it's educational as well as they are selling the pieces. But it's amazing what you can learn from that company. Just
Eden,
sort of a
Kathy,
little,
like Garden of Eden, Eden.
Yes. And
Like
it's interesting what you can learn.
Okay.
But to add to what you are saying, Kathy, I think it's very important that we contribute to this education, because when you are facing private or collectors, more on a business to consumer model, the role of educating and giving out all the knowledge so that people really can learn about what is vintage, what is exceptional, what is rare, is very important for us in the industry to have as a role. For sure, I totally agree with you.
Lauren, do you have anything to add to that?
I'll just say, I mean, I agree with everything, you know, both panelists have said, and I know Julie mentioned some of the larger names, but I think one of the fun things about vintage is that there are also so many kind of lesser known niche makers who have these followings. Each one, you know, just a couple examples, like a Raymond Yard, a J.E. Caldwell, Belle Perron, Georges Lafont. And each of them has really specific stylistic qualities about them. And it's one of the fun areas of vintage and antique jewelry to kind of go down those paths of learning about them and seeking out, you know, the supply that already exists, as, you know, there's no new supply coming in.
Okay,
so I want to really quick, Regina, I'd like to jump in with a question, kind of piggyback on what Lauren said. You know, as you three experts on vintage and the estate antique jewelry, are there names that come up in the market sometimes that get you excited, where you're like, you know, it's not necessarily a Van Cleef or a Harry Winston, or a Cartier, but it's like, oh, I love pieces from this time period by this specific house. They were so well made. The design is interesting and I don't see them there often. Or even examples of like specific kinds of, I don't know, mourning jewelry or something like that you don't see often, but get you excited.
I mean, I would say it's almost hard to pinpoint because there are so many great, you know, great ones within this industry. But absolutely. And I think every collector kind of starts to fall in love with one or the other, or, you know, I believe we were just talking previously before the webinar started about, you know, exhibitors or panelists who, you know, had specific earrings or something that they were looking for from a specific designer. I mean, it's a fun aspect of it.
Yeah. What about, like, for instance, David Webb? Is that a brand that might come in, you might be like, ooh, this is a good one, right? Or Siemens Scheps. So maybe they're not that high end Van Cleef, but they're that next level of really iconic, recognizable jewelry.
Yeah. I mean, just as an example, this is a Raymond Yard double clip bracelet. So the clips come off of this mechanism and can be worn as individual brooches. This a well-known maker, but not a Cartier, not a Van Cleef Arpels, but made absolutely incredible, fabulous jewelry, and was really known for the quality of gemstones that he used. So
nice piece.
Examples like that.
Okay.
I love that you have that in your living room.
This is actually my office, but
okay.
I grabbed a couple of little things from the safe just because I think it's always
I did the same thing.
Jewelry.
Oh, nice.
Good.
Show and tell.
Oh, so let's do a little show and
tell. We're doing
tell.
like a show and tell.
Perfect. That's perfect. So I guess before I go to the next question, maybe Kathy, obviously, if you pulled some things from the safe, you pulled things that you like and that kind of like, wow. So why don't you share them with us?
Well, one of the things I did pull, I like pieces like what Lauren does. I like pieces that turn into something else, or you can repurpose into something else. And of course you have to have a story. Your customer loves the story, whether you have any provenance of that piece, or you can go back in time and history and even talk about what the world affairs were like going on during the Art Deco time, how free the women were. They wore no underwear. They put a strap on their, across their breasts so that they could look like boys. They chopped their hair off. So my customers love the story of the piece. So one of the things that I love where you can repurpose, or it has been repurposed, is if you can.
Yep.
This is, look at that deco. It's a brooch, kept a brooch, of course.
Yep.
But the bail, which folds down, also goes over pearls, anything you wanted to go over. And I wear this a lot. I get a lot of compliments on this, but just another way that you can tell your customer there are different ways that we can use this jewelry.
Yeah. I just want to tell you that my next question was going to be, what about repurposing jewelry? So you've already answered that. So, Julie, have you pulled any pieces for show and tell? Just so I don't.
Well, I'm at home, so I.
Okay, that's fine. I just
don't have anything to show you, but I think what I find very interesting again is the new trends in terms of type of jewelry that comes back into trend. Typically, brooches that are now worn both by women and men in different circumstances. I think this is really interesting to follow as well, to see that, pieces that initially were more worn in more traditional ways suddenly have a new way of being experienced and worn by different type of people. And we've seen this from the red carpet, but also, of course, from with our current clients. So that's another recent trend that I found very, very interesting.
What about, for instance, and I know we've talked about some of the big names, the big brands, but there's a lot of very good costume vintage, such as Marcel Boucher, who used to design for Cartier. He also did a lot of lines in very nice, non-gemstones. He did a lot with rhinestones. A lot of Marcel Boucher pins, can easily fetch $1,000. So, how does that fall in some of the fashion vintage? I've stumped you. Okay.
Well, I mean, I would say, obviously there is some aspect of attainability there. So, and I would go kind of a step further and say that with, the entrance of the internet and Instagram, it has been driving desire for that kind of type of fashion jewelry. Obviously, I think anybody given the option to buy the real thing versus, something that is a lower price point, that's a different conversation. But I think that's one of the things that has been really kind of driving this re-interest in vintage and antique pieces.
So actually, perfect lead in. I paid you to say that, Lauren. So my next question is, what's driving this whole, all of a sudden, I had told you all prior to us going live that I was recently at a trade show. and 4 of the busiest booths were vintage booths. And I remember being at this trade show when there was just one vintage, right? But there were 4 booths and they were busy. So what do you think's driving this? Is this individuality people want to have, or is it the merchants are seeing something to say, hey, wait a minute, this is something I can make a very good margin on. I don't have to worry about the customer price shopping. So we'll just start with Lauren and work backwards. How's that?
Sure. I mean, I think that there are a variety of reasons. I don't think it's one singular reason. Obviously, there's a sustainability component to it, but I would say that one of the driving forces, and again, social media and the internet have played into that, is that people are not looking for mass manufactured goods. They're looking for a special, unique experience, a piece that speaks to their personal style, something that they can't necessarily find everywhere, that, you know,
Not
that
everyone's going to have.
And the experience of kind of going on that journey to get to that piece is also fun for them. I think that people are really falling in love with that, and that all the other factors are kind of helping them along the way.
Okay, so Julie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's you have two behaviors. One again is for people who want something unique, that's rare, that's going to be just for them and that matches their taste, and that's kind of one group of people. And there's another group of people who are really looking for more bargains. So we also we have kind of 2 types of behavior, but the good news is 2/3 of the buyers are more looking for the differentiation, the uniqueness, the artistry from the past, all the knowledge, all the the know-how, that really comes from the past, the perfection of how things were done. And that has been one of the driving elements of the growth of the vintage business in the last few years.
Kathy, do you see a trend?
Yes, I agree with
stores?
both. And also, my store in California is all estate jewelry. And how I advertise that out there is it is green. We've repurposed something, and Californians are very aware of that, and they love that. And I think that driver has really helped me in California of how green
jewelry is.
This jewelry is.
Yeah. Do you, in California, like one thing I see myself is a lot of young couples, right? And I always listen to the conversation of, oh, I'm buying lab grown because it's better for the environment, right? So obviously we debunk that, right? And I say,
Yes.
hey, if you really want to do something good for the environment, buy a pre-owned. So do you
I mean, that goes with anything, right? If you want to save the environment, buy stuff that's already been made.
Already out there. So do you do a lot of engagement rings that are pre-owned?
Yes, vintage. And I would say the style well, my store's in Carmel by the Sea, and the style there, very Art Deco, is so hot for me in the engagement ring area.
Okay.
Everybody's smiling. I guess same for you guys, right?
I think Art Deco is one of those eras that's never going to go out of fashion.
I love it.
Like the clean lines and like just this beautiful simplicity. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Lauren, but I just feel like
I will say too that you're also kind of almost comparing apples to oranges sometimes, because the craftsmanship of these older pieces is so special, and you wouldn't be able to reproduce that for the value that they're getting in the new market. And that also, adds to what makes it so popular. But I am seeing, similar things too. Clients who are concerned about their impact on the environment, and I tell them, there's no smaller carbon footprint than getting something that has already been produced.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. Are there any materials that, just say I'm a jeweler and a customer comes in and they have some vintage they want to sell me or pre-owned. Are there any things like I should avoid, like ivory? If something comes in with ivory, how do you handle something like that if it's ivory?
What I do is I buy what I like and what I know is going to sell, and I do turn a lot away, because people bring pieces in all day long to sell. Of course, ivory is one, but it depends on if I feel I can resell it.
I also would say that I stay away from ivory. And in general, if anybody is ever, concerned about materials that they're buying, ask questions is the best advice. ask questions, do your research. There are not that many materials that are problematic. Obviously, I've written one of them, but that's kind of my advice on that.
Oh, can you guys discuss some of the metals that we're going to find, especially in some of the older pieces? Not necessarily always 18K. Are there different types you're going to see in some of the vintage pieces? Is it unusual to see gemstones set in silver? Maybe perhaps Julie, you'd like to answer that one.
It's not unusual depending on the period. I think the use of certain material is very much linked to specific periods. So the value would come from the craftsmanship, the piece, the date of the piece. So you would see typically in the Victorian age some beautiful pieces that would be set on gold and silver. So I think it's there is no from the different eras, you will see different materials with different values of gold from 14, 15, of course 18, and also of course silver. So yeah,
like if a customer comes in, they bring something, it's beautiful, and you look at it and you're like, wow, it's only 10K. This isn't worth it. But it's more like, no, this is what they used during that period.
It would be worth it based on, again, the unicity of the piece, the craftsmanship behind it, and the fact that it is really from that period. So it represents the art of that period. And in that sense, it has great value.
Now, Kathy, say I come into your store and I know you said, you're going to buy what you can sell, obviously. Say I had some, I don't know, a gold bracelet maybe with some multicolor stones in it, right? Nothing special, maybe from the 90s. I know this is going to be a loaded question, but like, what would you say to me, listen, your best option is to melt this or repurpose it because it's not really one of these beautiful David Webb type pieces that, people are going to buy because it is?
What I do in that instance, because those things might sell, I'll keep them in my cases for so many months until I will send it to, to melt. I don't pay much over scrap gold price for that. And I do always advise them first that they'd like to try and sell it somewhere else. I give them names of gold buying places or try on the internet themselves, and they always have me. I always give my offer to buy. Chances are they do come back to me because I do give money also for the gemstones. But I give it about 6 months, and then if it doesn't sell, I will melt it.
Okay. Julie, because I know I've been on your site. It's fabulous. How do you price it?
How do we price it?
How do you price it to sell? So like, okay, I'm going to go back to David Webb again, right? Someone comes in.
No. We work together. We work together with the merchant to make sure that the price is competitive for the private client. So together we will define the price that we believe is a price where we can achieve a sale.
So you kind of look history, whatever, like
history, value, unicity. If you've been on our website, you would see that we tend to favor everything that's unique. So we don't have multiples. So that's kind of the way we would curate our inventory. Because that's who we are, the sort of audience we are catering for, and then it's almost on a one piece by piece discussion that we would price each piece of jewelry that's on the website. Yes.
Let's flip over to Lauren. Do you take this? Do you take some of this jewelry in on consignment, or is it like I'm just going to buy it and then resell it? Is there a difference for you?
For me personally, I take very few items on consignment. I just, that's how I run my business model. Having said that, it's not a never, but just in general, I kind of like to stand pretty firmly behind my pricing. And if it's something that's at a price, that is going to be good for the end user, I will purchase it myself. So I don't know if that's kind of answers the question there.
No, that's fine. I'll just wrap this question up with you because I know we have a lot of Q&A that was submitted in before, and we want to make sure we address them all. So Kathy, how do you price?
I try and get as much as I possibly can.
Okay, yeah. Much as possible.
Especially in California, the expenses are high. But one of the pieces I really look for, especially out in California, is I like pieces that maybe belong to a star, a musician, someone fairly famous, and I will pay extra for that because I'm getting the story, and I have a good many connections out there. So I do have a lot of movie star jewelry, and you can, I mean, how are you going to check the price on that? You know, you have such a good provenance on that. You get information on that, photos of maybe Zsa Zsa Gabor wearing the earrings. And so
just like a good piece
premium
of antique furniture, jewelry with a provenance that you could tie back to someone really kind of takes it to a whole new level.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, we see this all the time at auction. I mean, I don't know if anybody read, but it was late last year, they auctioned off all of Mary Tyler Moore's jewelry. And, you know, Mary Tyler Moore, not somebody that was specifically known for wearing jewelry or like on Elizabeth Taylor level, but she had some nice pieces, and they sold every single one of them. And they got well above the pre-sale estimates, I believe, for almost all of them. So yeah, I think there's an extra little something, particularly for people who were fans of that particular actress or musician or what have you.
Yeah.
I am wearing an Elizabeth Taylor brooch today for the webinar.
Oh. Let's see. Show and tell. Show and tell.
Show and tell. I don't know if you can see
it.
Yeah,
I compliment you on it. That is just magnificent. So, okay. So I think we can move over to Q&A because we do have a lot of questions that were submitted in ahead of time. So I'll turn it over to Michelle for the Q&A.
Okay, thank you so much. That was a great discussion. So as Regina mentioned, we do have quite a few questions, but before that, I wanted to read a little message from our sponsor. Just give me 1 second to find it. This webinar is brought to you by GIA, the Gemological Institute of America, protecting consumers and supporting the global gem and jewelry trade since 1931 through research, education, and laboratory services. So thanks again to our sponsor, GIA. Now, I'm going to get into the questions. I'm going to start with one that was submitted beforehand, and it was something people asked in a couple different ways. So what are the best resources for determining the time period of vintage pieces? And I would also probably maybe extend this out to say antique sources as well, but people are looking for good resources to kind of date a piece of jewelry. Lauren, I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. I mean, obviously, if you feel like you are not in a place where you have the knowledge to do it yourself, it's definitely important to seek out experts who you trust. And that can be a, vintage or antique dealer that is known to you, or it could be something like an IAJA, International Antique Jewelers Association service. And, having said that too, there are lots of fantastic books. There's a lot of resources that exist still in print today for our industry, where you can also really find helpful information. It's kind of like being a detective on some level, and you're, tracking down, the clues as to when that piece was made.
Okay. Julie and Kathy, resources for dating antique and vintage jewelry.
I would very much say what Lauren has said is just go to trusted dealers. I mean, expert dealers, people who've been doing this for years, generations. And again, as we do at the Jeweler Circle, also partner with the likes of IAJA, which are the most renowned experts in their field. So that gives you really the assurance of the knowledge and the credibility and the authenticity of the piece and the value, of course.
Okay. Kathy, anything to add to that?
I'm just a big proponent, and if you're going to get into this business, or if you're already in it, you better study, you better know history, you better read every book on it. It's so easy to make mistakes, pay too much, not describe it well enough to your customer. You need to educate yourself. Any seminar you could go to, but really books. I started with reading jewelry history books.
Okay. Are there any you'd recommend offhand?
Well, I'm thinking back where, like say for Art Nouveau jewelry. Oh, there you go.
What is that? I'm sorry,
Oh, okay.
people can't see,
Understanding
Lauren.
jewelry. I would say this is the equivalent of the Bible for vintage antique pieces. Anybody who's really interested should get this book. No affiliation in any way. It's just, it has every foundation. It is, I would say, probably the best place to start.
Yeah, you really do need a full library on it.
It's true that there are people who have dedicated their lives to jewelry books. There is always something more to learn, but that's a good resource for somebody who is starting out.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I totally agree with that too. I love jewelry books. We had a question that came in during the discussion I thought was interesting. In Edwardian and Art Deco jewelry, discuss synthetic versus natural rubies and sapphires in terms of value. How do you look at that?
Well, I feel when I buy the pieces, they're just used as accent stones. Your synthetic. Like in the brooch I held up with the small sapphires in there. They are synthetic, but that's to be an accent. So I don't think it takes away or adds when it's the smaller colored stones in there that are synthetic.
Okay. Julie and Lauren, any thoughts on evaluating synthetic versus natural?
Well, I mean, I would say I agree with Kathy's explanation. I mean, if you're talking about a larger stone that is a synthetic versus a natural sapphire, big difference. But it was common for us to see during that period calibre stones, smaller stones that were used as accents. There just wasn't the availability of that material that was matched like that. So that can, sometimes be an indication that a piece is from that period. So I think that's kind of where that's going.
But not, what you're both saying is not a big factor in determining the value because they were often just used as smaller accent stones.
It was common to the period.
Julie, anything to add on that?
No, perfect. No, thanks.
Okay. Someone else wanted to know, we had a couple of questions, which is always a question anytime we do webinar this about trends. What periods and eras are popular right now? And what are the biggest changes in the vintage market in the last few years? We'll start with the first question. What periods and eras are particularly popular right now?
For me, I said before, Art Deco.
Art Deco, yes, for sure.
Absolutely. Art Deco is always, and I think will continue to be a staple, but I'm also seeing a lot of love for kind of even a little bit older Victorian stuff that incorporates yellow gold, antique chains. I think those are also things that people are trending towards right now. And also vintage charms. I feel like vintage charms have just been having their heyday lately.
Why do you think that is? Are people liking to have charms to tell a story, to kind of express themselves?
Absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to this whole experience of finding something that is meaningful to you. And again, with vintage and antique jewelry, the new generation always has to find their own way to wear it. And it makes it very, wearable. You can take something that maybe you wouldn't have worn in another way and add it to a, necklace that has lots of charms on it, and that feels natural to you. So yeah, I think wearability.
If I could just pop in on that, I'm going to hold this up for show and tell if everyone could see it. But I was at the vintage show in January in Miami, and I found this little tiny charm of 2 horse heads, and it had meaning to me. And I bought it, took it home, and I'm like, I'm going to do something with this. And I had a friend of mine in the industry mount it in enamel for me. So when you said that about the vintage charm, I know I got up and left because I had to share that. Because again, you can buy one little thing and you can do something with it that has make it special to you.
And Regina, I just bought a charm bracelet that it came from the man who he had given it to his wife, but he was the star in the TV show Rin Tin Tin, which I mean, it's an old television show.
So,
But,
yes,
you know, in there he had a gold dog, and they were all charms that the studio had given to him, and he put on a charm bracelet. So I might just do that into a necklace and wear the charm bracelet in the front.
Yep.
It's so
Fantastic.
interesting. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
That is really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Here's a question. If an original gemstone has been replaced with a new gemstone in the same setting, can the piece still be sold as vintage?
So I think the important thing here is that there is always disclosure. I mean, obviously, sometimes it is obvious and it is clear that that has happened, or a newer stone cut doesn't match the period of the piece. I think it's important to, when you're buying and selling, ask lots of questions. You know, and I think that sometimes the people can be hesitant to get into vintage and antique because they don't know what to do with scenarios like that.
Right.
But honestly, there's a lot of incredible old material that has been used to fuel new jewelry too. I mean, it's something that's special about the older material.
And also, I think it goes back to education, where people need to know the cuts, especially of diamonds. They need to know the difference between old European, old mine. Education on the cut as well.
Right, right. So they can spot, oh, well, this is a quote vintage piece, but I can tell this was a diamond cut, not of this period. So let me ask some questions.
Yeah, and it's okay, but you know, like Lauren said, they have to disclose that.
Right.
And a lot of people don't mind.
I think transparency is critical, because we need to build trust and understanding of the vintage jewelry. So the disclosure and the transparency are very important.
Yeah, very, very true. Kathy, I have another question here that I think you might find interesting. Since we were talking about education and reading books and getting yourself knowledgeable, someone wants to know, what are some ways you can discern between genuine and reproduction antique pieces of antique jewelry?
Oh God, that's tough. That's a lot of education on that. And it takes years of dealing with both to know that, and what's a cast piece, what's, you know, the platinum 20s, 1910s and 20s filigree. Boy, I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
I would agree that you really have to handle and look at thousands of pieces of jewelry to really nail that particular skill. Having said that, there are certain things that can be a giveaway, like we talked about, you know, diamond cuts. Typically, you're looking for a certain amount of wear on the piece, or something that looks like it has been produced using a machine versus done by hand. Always important to turn a piece over and look at the back of the piece. You know, it can be hard and it can be difficult if you're starting out.
But if it's just not right, you get a feeling to go farther. It is my experience. If it's just not right.
But you would only be able to get that feeling as Laura noted, that you would have to have looked at thousands and thousands of pieces. So in other words, the answer to this question is there's no easy answer. You have to do this for a long time. You have to look at a lot of pieces, and then things will start to pop out to you like, oh, this doesn't look right here. I don't think this is from the time period I'm being told it is, this type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the best thing, as Kathy said earlier, the best thing you can do is, if you're in this business, get educated, go to shows, look at, jewelry shows, view pieces at auction. I mean, there are lots of different ways that you can handle pieces of jewelry, even if you don't have access to them yourself. And that will help you get a feel for all of these things.
All right. I want to ask a question now. We had a few questions come in about kind of getting noticed, like how to get started and how to get noticed. So somebody wanted to know, would like to hear ways about how to sell online / use social media to stand out and be found. Thank you. They want to know, because obviously we've talked, social media has played a big role in fueling interest in vintage and antique jewelry. What are some of the things you all do for your businesses online that you found work to, what are some maybe social media posts that have gotten, or videos that have gotten a lot of likes, or events? Like, anything. How do you let people know I sell vintage jewelry, this is what I have to offer, and this is how it's different than this other retailer?
Well,
I think it,
I do a lot of events in both my stores, and I also do buying events so many times a year, 3, 4 times a year, and getting that out is important.
Where you're asking people to come in with things that they want to sell and you're buying from the public.
Yes.
Would you do those types of events? Do a lot of people end up coming with something to buy and leaving with something from your case?
They do, because we offer 20%. You get what we offer plus an extra 20% in the store if you want to put the money towards something that I already
Very
have,
smart.
sort of a trade in. And I'm surprised at the amount of people that use that option. They just
I'm
want
not.
new and fresh and
I
different.
totally leave with something. I'm the person that goes somewhere with something to get rid of and comes back with 5 other things.
There you go. It works.
Oh, that's really good. Anything beyond that, Kathy, that's really worked for you? Anything online or so much, or you?
Well, we post online, but say, we actually do mailers too, different things, how to sell, get postcards out, tell people what to bring in, and it's a constant reminder for them. And then I'm always posting goofy videos too.
What do you mean goofy videos?
Well, like I like jewelry that, like Lauren showed, that does something else. Like say, I have, this is an older piece. It just is a ball on a chain, but of course now it won't open when I want it to, but it opens into a hidden cross. And if you put a video of how it opens, if I can figure. So you have a hidden engraved cross inside.
Oh, wow.
Neat. That's a special piece.
I mean, and people love that. So you do a video of how it opens and talk a little bit about it. And they love anything that becomes something else. Is what I've
Transforms.
found.
Interesting. Yeah, I do think those kind of pieces, whether old or new, do well online. Lauren and Julie, what about promoting your businesses?
well, it's you have to follow the customer journey really. So you have to have a presence online that's of course on social and Instagram, and create content that's going to be engaging, and truly video is proven to be the kind of content that gets people really into it. That's one thing. But
And Julie, are you using TikTok as well? I know you mentioned Instagram.
we are not using TikTok yet. We're really focused on Instagram, and that's where we are creating content that showcases different type of jewelry, pictures, but also videos, worn videos, and because it makes people realize how it could be for them, and that's really the objective. Is this could be for me? So start getting them excited, but you also have to think that people sometimes start searching not only on Instagram but also on search engines. So you also have to have a presence on the likes of Google to make sure that if someone is keying in vintage jewelry, you be one of them popping up, so they can follow through. And then as part of the whole journey, we have now started to also do email marketing and emails, so that every week people know what's new, what are the new pieces we have received. Also combining the pieces with an educational part, always telling a story about an era, what was so special about that period, that gem, that brand. So people are also learning as well as enjoying seeing the amazing pieces. So really making sure that we do not forget that it's a journey for them. So we just need to have a presence across the different touch points.
Yeah, and it can't just be, as you mentioned, Julie, it can't be sell, sell, sell all the time. There has to be education. There has to be interest, because I might not always be interested in buying something, but I'll continue to open your emails if I'm learning something every time I'm opening.
But this is exactly what we've seen. The more educational emails that we've sent out are the ones that have been the most successful, interestingly enough, because people are so keen to learn from people with authority who are credible in that space, that they carry on opening and reading and learning from us.
Lauren, what about you? Online,
Sure.
offline methods of
I would
promoting business?
say Instagram has played a role in my business specifically. And I think kind of tips or takeaways that have worked for me would be, one, definitely, there's a difference between showing a piece on a white background and specifically in a static photo versus video content. Really showing, what a piece is like in real life. So being worn by somebody in natural light. And again, too, I think it really is nice that it gives you that opportunity to take advantage of storytelling. And with vintage and antique jewelry, it's exciting. And there's so many ways now to share about something. And two, when you're just starting out in a business, it's a tool that is very low cost. And if you're authentic, people generally seem to be responding well to that. So I would say that's something that can be a powerful tool for both finding new customers and also, showing new stock to customers that you already have.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think that it's interesting that you mentioned being authentic, because I think the trend online, and I'm sure you've seen this in recent years, like particularly with the advent of TikTok and then Reels and Instagram, it kind of went from being this very curated kind of Instagram experience to like just being very genuine and being like authentic. And it's okay if like it's not perfect all the time, but people just want to see like genuine content, not stuff that's necessarily so polished.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And specifically when it comes to jewelry and vintage jewelry, they want to see what it looks like in real life. They don't want to buy something that looked amazing, in photos and they get it home and it's, disappointing. Jewelry should always be more exciting in person. But I think that social media does allow us to capture a sliver of that, and people should take advantage of that.
I want to move on to a couple of questions. We're getting very specific time periods and kinds of jewelry. We have a listener who wants to know, is there a market for 75% platinum and 25% palladium large pieces from the 1950s and 1960s? They say we have a client with quite a few pieces.
Not for me.
Not for me.
I mean, my best advice is just if you have pieces from a client that you're looking to sell, go contact a dealer who you feel comfortable with, and, see if they are interested in buying, if they're not interested in buying, if they give you the name of somebody else who is. That's my best advice on that.
Okay. Someone else wanted to know, what time period would we see 10 karat gold jewelry?
So again, it can be found in the Victorian era, pretty common. Having said that, that doesn't mean that there can't be newer versions of 10 karat. I would say it really depends on the piece.
And I've come across, oh, I'm sorry, Lauren.
No, you please add on.
I've come across a lot of 10 karat pieces made by Kremitz and Company, even back from like Art Nouveau styles. And because, my one store is on the East Coast and I'm close to Newark where they were based, I see a lot of it, and they're delicate, adorable little pieces, and they sell well.
And their gemstones were really, at the time, our JK gemstones were like the,
So someone else wanted to know, and I'm not going to say the name of the brand, but they need to get a 18 karat gold compact authenticated from a very well-known brand that was mentioned earlier on this webinar. And the brand wants to charge $1,800 to do this. Can I have it done for much less? And if I have to say the name of the brand for you guys to answer, I guess I can say it. There's nothing wrong with it, but
I guess you need to say the name of the brand.
Van Cleef & Arpels. That's the question from this, that they want to get this.
And the expertise would be for $1,800. Is that what the price you mentioned?
Correct. And this person is asking, can I get it done for less?
Yes, you can. You can reach out to the IAJA and they can help you with that.
And tell for people, the IJA is for people who might not know.
Oh, sorry, the International Antique Jewel Association.
Okay. I'm sorry. Somebody brought that up earlier and I meant to ask you to spell out the initials.
Is that you?
No, it is not me, although I wish it was. Kathy, if it was me, I'd just bring it to you.
For free, I know.
Yes, that's the best price. Okay, I'm going to end with one question that's timely. Someone wants to know, what is the best way to navigate the Las Vegas Antique Show as a first timer? And I think actually this is an excellent question because
Excellent question.
for those that don't know, the Las Vegas Antique Jewelry and Watch Show is owned by the same people who owns Couture. Last year, and I assume it'll be the same this year, it was taking place in the Wynn. It was kind of like before you walked in Couture, you went by the ballrooms, the old Couture ballrooms, and that's where they're having the antique show. I assume it'll be the same this year. And I think that in the Miami Antique Show are my favorites. So what are your tips for somebody that's going in there for the first time? Because it definitely can be overwhelming. It's 2 ballrooms, so it's a pretty big show. This is a show too, people might remember used to be at the Paris, which I loved it over there, but
Yep,
I did too.
that's a biggie.
I just thought that the aesthetic of that hotel was a very good fit for that show.
It was. I would just suggest if it's their first time, they better go row by row. How else are they going to do it?
My advice would just be to really kind of like start asking questions and find people or exhibitors who are willing to spend some time with you and talk with you and answer questions for you. I mean, there's more jewelry there to be seen than you can possibly imagine, but
You could spend your entire time in Vegas at that show.
Yeah.
But you know, I would say as a longtime exhibitor, it's a fun show. We really meet a lot of interesting people. And you can really come by and stop by and see us.
Everybody needs to come to you first.
Are you saying though, Lauren, you don't have a lot of time to ask questions, so seek out the exhibitor to answer questions?
Well, I just think that there are certain, so when you're dealing with exhibitors, I mean, we have a very colorful industry. And some people, you know, everybody should be willing to teach and explain to somebody who is interested in the industry, but doesn't necessarily have a high level of knowledge. So it's important to find people who are willing to spend that time with you. And you'll find some people who maybe, you know, are a little more standoffish, but you'll find some who are so excited about sharing their knowledge with you. There's a lot of great opportunity at that show to really see a lot of jewelry and learn a lot about it.
And would you recommend going first thing, like first day or last day, or both?
I would say first day. Last day tends to be on, you know, we're packing up. Other, you know, deals are getting finished. I think first day, I think early in the morning is a good tip. I mean, it is best to try and go kind of at times where it's not as busy. So I would agree with that. Those are helpful tips.
And don't forget about watches. I mean, one thing no one really talked about, but, you know, the pre-owned watch market is hot right now. And, you know, there's a lot of places to look, you know, for, you know, how to price it, how to buy it, you know, online as well. A lot of different sites the market will bear.
Julie, any Las Vegas Antique Show tips?
Haven't been yet, so.
Well, I guess you're taking these tips from Lauren and Kathy then.
So I was more
That's interesting too, because we got Kathy's perspective as an attendee and Lauren's perspective as an exhibitor.
So I'm taking the tips.
Michelle, I also wanted to ask Lauren, I see at the show a good many reproductions. Have you found that as well?
Well, I will say I do get out to walk around a bit, but I spend majority of my time at my booth, so I don't see as many reproductions. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, they're out there. That's something that
and you do have to be careful. You have to be careful,
which is why it's so important to really build rapport with the person you're working with and ask questions, and nobody should ever make you feel bad for asking those questions. You want to work with people who take it and answer it and explain to you, and can really give you some feedback.
And if someone does make you feel bad, my advice would be to move on and find someone else to work with. There are plenty of other people to work with in the industry, and I agree. I think also, I mean, obviously it goes back to what Kathy said earlier, like you have to be educated. If you're going to be a first-time attendee at the show, maybe read the book that Lauren suggested, or at least look through it before the show, so you know you have at least a little background of what you want to look for, what you should be looking for. I think it's a great show.
It's also fun time sometimes too, if there are people that you've followed on Instagram and pieces that you've seen, you know, like that. And those are people that you start with and you go visit their booths first. And that can sometimes be a good place to start if you really are overwhelmed.
Yeah. I know I said that was the last question, but one came in that I actually want to ask. We're almost coming up on 3 o'clock, but someone wants to know, what are your favorite online auctions to buy from? Or auction houses? I don't think it necessarily has to be online.
I have gotten a few things from Julian's in California.
They do a lot of celebrity auctions.
Mm-hmm.
I will say we buy most of our inventory privately. You know, the auction cycle has really changed in the last, you know, couple of years, and it's not, you know, there are fewer bargains to be found. And for us, it's not where we do a majority of our buying.
Okay.
And for us, it's different because it's our business is an online business that's sourced from dealers. So
Right.
we source directly with the dealers, and then we promote their inventory online.
I mean, I guess the question could also be like, if you personally buy any jewelry at auction, where do you like to buy them? Or perhaps nobody here does.
No, I have bought some things from Christie's. Well, as you know, Michelle and I, we've been there. So it has
And
to be something
Sotheby's
dramatic.
also has some, Sotheby's does some nice auctions as well.
They do too, yes.
Well, Lauren, Kathy, Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that was a lot of questions, but people were really interested in the topic, and I thought it was a great discussion. Thanks again to our sponsor, GIA, and everyone for joining us today. My next question will return Tuesday, April 9th. We're going to have a session on what jewelers need to know about insurance. Until then, please take care of yourself, and thank you again. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Bye-bye.